Pop those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Hey guys, welcome back into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I'm Jake, your bartender, and I'm joined on center stool by Drew. And man, we're all across the board again today. At least we got basketball and football in there. You know, maybe we'll talk a little bit of baseball in the future. Maybe we'll talk a little bit of hockey in the future. But for today, it's the big two, man. The big two sports in America, football and basketball.
And I completely agree with Charlie. There's a lot to talk about today. It's going to be a full episode of all kind of crazy highlights talking about. And then, sadly, the Nuggets are going home. Or we're home.
You know what else is sad about it? The 76ers, I imagine. Because that is even probably more heartbreaking than dropping the 17-point lead the Nuggets had. I don't know. Which way would you rather lose? Would you rather kind of like peter out like the Nuggets did? Or would you rather just get stabbed in the heart right at the very end, Drew? They're both terrible. But
I think getting stabbed in the heart sounds a lot quicker of a death.
Oh, I don't know. You get a full off season to think about all this. I don't think there's a quick death either way.
I mean, let's just be honest. That was a nasty bounce. It was nasty.
It was a great shot. And sometimes that's the difference, right? If you misses that, that's the difference between a great player and, you know, you're just really, really good. So, look, we'll talk about Kawhi and his shot a little bit later. But first, I want to start, Drew, with some of these NFL free agents remaining. So, we're past free agency, or at least the first wave of it. We're past the draft. Your team is probably digging at the bottom of the barrel here. Who are the best guys out there if you want to improve your team before 2019 starts? We're going to start by talking about all that. Do you want to start from the bottom to the top? Do you want to start top to bottom?
It makes no difference to me. Sharif, I'm glad you're joining us. Really, all these guys that are sitting there are either too high of a price tag that they're asking for right off the bat, or it's one of those players that teams just don't know what's left in the tank. So, you know, these guys can be quality players and play good 16 or maybe a little bit less games than that for a team, or they could be someone that maybe like a Des Bryant where they get the first practice and they're hurt.
Now, Sharif's trying to calm me down a little bit. He says Denver will be fine next year, but I don't know, man. This sounds like the run is over. This was the magical year. No, I'm kidding. But I absolutely agree with you. These are a lot of guys that, for some reason or other, are not on a team yet. Sometimes it's the price. Sometimes it's the talent doesn't match what these teams want to do. Or sometimes these teams have gone into free agency and the offseason to this point saying, I can do better than this. And now in the next couple weeks, next couple months, we're going to figure out, no, we couldn't actually do better than this. And it's time to just, you know, take that humble pie and go sign whoever's best available. We're going to talk about some of these best fits, or at least some places we think some of these guys would fit as well. Why don't we start at the bottom of the list? The 10th best free agent, in my opinion here, Drew, Shane Ray, defensive end or outside linebacker, however you want to look at it, formerly of the Denver Broncos, 26 years old. Plenty of talent coming out of college, but he never really kind of lived up to that talent in Denver, even when he was the third guy. Obviously, they didn't think too highly of him drafting Bradley Chubb a couple of years ago as well. How much of a market do you see for a guy like Shane Ray out there?
I mean, you're talking about a guy that completely underperformed where they thought he was going to be, had a little bit of field off the field issues coming out of college, going into the pros. A Missouri guy. To be honest with you, I don't think there's a huge market for this guy. I think it's going to be a one-year deal, prove-it deal. I think it's going to be one of those scenarios where someone is getting hurt and they're just desperate need for a roster fill, and that's where Shane Ray's going to find his place. Because if you're going to succeed somewhere as a pass rusher, it's usually next to one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and you had Von Miller there and Bradley Chubb this last year, and you couldn't find any kind of time, or not time, any kind of ability to get to the quarterback, show what kind of skills, why you're such a high draft pick. I mean, I think this guy's going to struggle finding a new home.
He still has all the physicality you want. He has enough size. He has enough speed. He has all the physical traits you want to see. You just haven't seen production on the field. I think some other places will probably give him a good chance in a rotation. So if I had to pick a single spot that I would sit there and point to and say, Shane Ray should go here, or this team should be interested in him, I would say my Tennessee Titans. Obviously, with Cameron Wake, 37 years old, coming in to play outside linebacker, and Harold Landry, an inexperienced rookie as well, you need more talent at that position. I would at least sign him and let him come in and kind of compete for a job, see if he can make this roster, and see if he can be a second, third, fourth pass rusher for a team. I get it didn't work out in Denver, but, you know, I don't think at 26 we can sit there and say the ship has sailed on him. He can't turn it around.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I agree. And I think the one-year deal, prove it kind of idea is totally fine, or maybe a 2-year super cheap deal from somewhere. Nobody's paying this
kid. Realistically, it's a one-year deal anyways, because he probably, if he doesn't succeed, won't make it into that second year anyways.
Good to see you, Brian.
I mean, that's realistic. I mean, you're talking about a team that doesn't have a lot of pass rushing ability as far as, well, you got tons of experience,
right,
and you got youth, but you don't have any of the meat in the middle that you really want when you're looking at a great defense that can get after a quarterback. It makes sense for a team like the Titans to go after a player like this, but I would like to see some of these young guys, maybe some of these undrafted guys, and see if some of them can make a spot in the NFL roster if it is a Tennessee Titan or not. Unfortunately for Shane Ray, I'm not knocking him down by any means. It's just you had your chance, and you had one of the best chances because, like I said,
you're playing across from Von Miller.
Exactly. And unfortunately for that, you're going to struggle to find a home.
Now, Sharif's with me. He's saying the Titans would be a good fit. Is there another squad out there that could absolutely use this guy right now?
No, I actually think that's probably...
I do think there are a lot of spots he could fit in. Like the Ravens, I think, would be a decent fit. You could use him in a rotational spot. Losing Zadarius Smith, you could move him out there to Baltimore, and I think that would be an okay signing. That pretty much anyone that runs a 34, I think, has some use for him. I don't think he's big enough to play defensive end in a 43. I don't think he's a guy who converts to that. But if you run a 34 and you're looking for any kind of depth, you could slot in everywhere. I just think the Titans are one of the teams that need the most depth, which is why I picked them.
No, as you asked me if there was any other team that needed him right now, the answer is no, because he would have a team. So the answer is no to me. I mean,
the rest of this list might have a similar answer.
But you're talking about not a 30-year-old. You're not talking about a guy that has had multiple teams that tried him out and didn't make it. This is a guy who got drafted by this team, couldn't make it on that one team. Sometimes coaches are like, I can get the best out of that guy. I can do it.
Sometimes it's politics. I mean, we don't necessarily know, even though everything I've heard is he doesn't live up to expectations. They drafted him thinking he was going to be that 10, 12, 14 sack a year guy. Remember, they spent a first-round pick in this kid a while back.
If I remember correctly, I think they traded up for him, too.
I don't remember that specifically, but I do remember them taking him incredibly highly. This is the guy who solves the problem of who's going to play across from Von Miller.
Right.
And he never panned out. So they take Bradley Chubb way high in the draft, too. I mean, obviously, there's almost a no-brainer when it happens. Now, Sharif's saying, what about the Chiefs? Well, if the Chiefs are going back to the 43 like everyone says, I don't think this is as good of a fit. I don't think Frank Clark particularly fits in a 34 either, so unless you're going with some kind of hybrid defense where you're going to run both of these things, I don't think Kansas City's the best fit.
Injury barring, I don't really see a fit in there either. I mean, they're literally pretty tight on the defensive ends, and I mean, I'm not saying that they're the greatest bunch out there, but really there's not a roster spot for another defensive end now, at least in the Chiefs depth chart.
And Sharif also threw the Patriots out there. I think that would be a good fit for them. I think that 34 principles they usually run, even though they kind of do run that hybrid defense, I think this team would find a way to make use of him. If he has the attitude, if he has the work ethic, I think he'd fit right into the Patriots. And they love discount players and rehabbing careers. So I think this would be a great fit for both sides.
Matthew said he's obviously a Vikings fan. He said the football bug has hit him hard.
I know. We should be talking about how the AAF wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Instead, we're out here talking about, NFL free agency bottom of the barrel. Very important stuff, by the way. We can move on.
I'm still going to go back to what I said about him. I think some coach will give him a chance. They're going to sit there and go, you had only one coach, one team. You haven't been traveling around. You're not a journeyman. Someone's going to give him a chance. But unfortunately for him, it's probably until injury comes and takes the reason why he's there.
Now, Brian's got him as a rotational guy in Houston. Would that be a good Jadeveon Clowney almost, if you don't get the long-term deal done, would he be a good guy to bring in and you say, hey, we get a year with Shane Ray, and if he works out, we can kind of buff him up into that next starter to take over for Clowney if he leaves and gets a mega deal somewhere else? I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good possibility. I mean, don't get me wrong. Everyone needs pass rushers. Everyone needs a rotation guy. But let's not ignore exactly all the facts that you gave me. And I gave you guys as well. He's 26. He was a first-round pick. He's only played for one team. He's not a journeyman. He hasn't really been injured. All these things are usually we're going to sign him as soon as free agency starts. Well, guess what? He's still sitting there. There is an issue somewhere along this line that goes, I don't know if I want to touch Shane Ray.
What's going on, Will? Good to see you as well. Also, Sharif says, can we see Eric Berry in Cleveland or Indianapolis? More on that later, because he's on this list as well. Let's move on to number 9, though, Drew. I have Derek Morgan, 30-year-old defensive end who took a gargantuan step back when it comes to production in Tennessee. I mean, the guy went from, I don't know if he had a sack last year. I think he might have had one. You talk about defensive ends falling off at 30. Usually you get an extra couple years here, but Derek Morgan, to me, has taken one of the biggest steps back, and he's always been one of those guys that's always a step behind the quarterback. He doesn't quite get the sack. He may generate pressure, but he can't seem to get the play that's just going to bury an offense and make it 2nd and 16 or 3rd and 12 or 3rd and 14. He never really gets – he's always one step behind. Now, out there, I still believe he is the 9th best free agent. I still think he has some value. Where do you see a guy like this winding up, who maybe isn't quite going to be a pass rusher, but especially in a 43? He's played as a 43 defensive end. He's played as a 34 outside linebacker. Is there a spot that could use a guy that's primarily a run defender?
I think this is a guy that's more realistic to find a team than Shane Ray off the bat. I think this is a guy that has a lot of experience underneath his belt. Someone that definitely underperformed last year. There's no doubt about it. Found his way out of Tennessee because of it. But someone like Derek Morgan, because he has done so well in the past, this isn't a guy that has never reached his potential. This is a guy that has had potential and shown it. And, 30 years old, a little bit of a question mark there. That age is always a scary mark in football nowadays. But to be honest with you, I think Derek Morgan has a lot more possibility of finding a home than Shane Ray does.
I think you might be right because he has performed at least at some level in the NFL, whereas we haven't really seen Shane Ray have those breakout years or even years where he shows flashes in the pan where you're like, this guy could develop. It's one of those things where he's been a bust to this point.
Yeah. Matthew, you want me to grow my hair back out, man?
I think you like long hair Drew a little bit better.
I like long hair Drew better, too. Sad.
Also, Sharif saying Derek Morgan can be a Patriot. I think we're going to be saying that a lot for the Patriots because they need to buff up that front seven. And there's still a lot of front seven guys out there who have some value. This would be a Patriot move, right? You rehab the veteran.
He's also saying he could play for both LA teams. I completely agree with that as well.
I think he has a lot of versatility, especially with the outside linebacker versus defensive end, where he can rotate. He can play in a 4-3. He can play in a 34, whereas some of these other guys out there, they're pretty much pigeonholed into one system or one kind of role that they're going to play. I would like to see him go to Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay has struggled against the run mightily. I think obviously with Jason Pierre-Paul going out, they're going to need a defensive end who's going to be able to come in and have some experience. I think he's going to be able to set the edge very well for them. He's going to help in run defense. With them drafting Devin White and them buffing up the defensive line by signing a guy like Derek Morgan, I think they might at least be able to be better at run defense than they were in years past. And I think in the NFL, if you can't stop the run, you're not stopping much of anything. I think that's where I would look to first. Before I looked at any of these other guys out there, he fits the 43 they kind of run. He'd probably play well next to Gerald McCoy as well. I think this would be a good pickup for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I could see it. Also joining like Vita Vea and I can't remember the other pass rusher on the other side, but definitely. I'm with Sharif also. He's saying Morgan can play for a contender. I mean, that's a guy that's a rotational piece that he can find himself in there. I'm not saying he's a starter from day one.
2 years ago, where he had 7 or 8 sacks for the Titans, and he was one of the best run defenders and edge setters from a defensive exterior kind of perspective. I would agree with that, but these days, after the drop he had with Tennessee, I don't know how many contenders are going to be looking at this guy like, yeah, we need to bring him in, and we need to add him to our defensive line to get that next step forward. He can help in running downs. He's the guy you want to come off the field, though, when it's 3rd and 7, and
they're throwing.
A rotational
piece. I mean, that's exactly what he is.
He could be. I think he could play every down still, especially in a team like Tampa that just does not have talent on that defensive line, especially with Pierre-Paul out. I think he could go be a 3-down guy because he still is known for rushing the passer. He knows how to do it. I just don't think you sign this guy and expect 10 sacks. I think you sign this guy and expect 3 or 4, and you just know when they run to his side of the defensive line, he's going to be able to force them inside and let the linebackers make an easy play.
Yeah, he's not a double-digit sack kind of guy. You'd be lucky to get 8 out of him.
I don't know if he's had 10 sacks in his career. I think maybe he had 1 year at 10 sacks, and that's about it, which for a former first-rounder, you got to say, it kind of doesn't live up out of his potential coming out of Florida.
Right, and Sharif has another point. Morgan will be cheap.
Yes, he will be, or he should be at least. Although he is coming off a $10 million a year contract, I wonder if that's why he's still out there, Drew, is because he expects 3, 4, 5, and the NFL is expecting 1 or 2. So maybe the money is what's keeping Derek Morgan unemployed at the moment.
It's a possibility.
Let's talk about number 8, Glover Quinn, Detroit safety, 33 years old, still a decent coverage guy. All things said about him, I don't know if I necessarily want him going up to make tackles, but I think he can make an impact in the back end of a secondary.
This is another one of those guys that's going to be sitting there during free agency and possibly into the first or second, third week until there's an injury happen. I think Quinn is one of those players that can still play because safety is one of those positions that you can literally play until your mid-30s, and he's right there at that mark, but no one's going to bring him as the centerpiece of their defense. No one's going to bring him in there as a future of safety. This is literally going to be a guy that if it's somewhere along the line that Eric Weddle gets hurt or Earl Thomas gets hurt, that they're going to bring in another veteran that's going to kind of fill that spot up. It is going to be a step down from those kind of quality players, but this is a guy that's going to have to wait until an injury happens. For him so far with the free agency, not someone picking him up right now, that's what I have to say about him.
And as for landing spots, again, I'm going Tampa Bay. I don't want to put too many guys going to one particular team, but I think Tampa Bay could really help on the back end here. They've obviously drafted a lot of back end players in the secondary. Over the past 2 years, they've kind of bring in a bunch of youth. I think bringing in a savvy veteran like Glover Quinn, who's been around, he's well respected both in his time at Houston and in Detroit. He's a guy who can also make plays on the ball and can also play this free safety role as well. If he has anything left in the tank, I think Tampa should give him a call and see if he can actually make things happen. Because, look, the secondary, for all they spent on it last year and all they've spent on the draft this year, has not been fixed, has not been good enough. You could sit there and say it's the pass rush. I think it's both. I think they need more talent on both things, or on both kind of fronts, and I think Glover Quinn is the guy who can make things happen.
Sharif says he can see Quinn playing for the Chargers or Indy. Both of those teams have injury bugs, and for sure the Chargers in their secondary. So it's a good possibility, and Indy in their secondary later in the year with I want to say Mike. That's their safety, Mike. I keep on forgetting.
Malik Hooker.
Was it Hooker?
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it was an older guy, one of the older safeties that went down at the end of the year. But anyways, regardless, you're 100% right, man. I agree with it. Both of those teams would make complete sense for him to go there, but I don't see him being signed until there's an injury happening.
And Sharif, I understand he wants a championship. I bet you if you ask all these free agency guys, that would be one thing they're talking about first is I want to win before I sign with a team that's going to pay me a little bit more money and not be good. The problem is, a lot of the time, these teams are not looking for a bunch of players. The teams that are close to winning a championship probably aren't looking for a 33-year-old perennial, mid-tier to slightly above safety to come in and make an impact right away.
Right now, it's all about rookies.
He already missed his shot. Eric Weddle signed with the Rams, right?
Right now, in this time of free agency, it's all about rookies, undrafted rookies, and they're going to find out what they got out of that group. And if they cannot find someone or injury-prone happens, that's when you see some of these older veterans getting off the free agency list. And that's it. I mean, that's just plain and simple. I hate to say it about everyone on this list, but it's just the truth, maybe minus one or two.
I think there's a few of them that still have some potential or whatever you want to call it, guys that can make high impact. I don't think Glover Quinn's one of them. So when we're at 7, I think there's a big gap between 7 and 4. Let me just say that. I think 7 and there's still probably 4 or 5 of these guys out there that can make a pretty good impact.
Even though they can make an impact, there's a reason why they're not getting signed. It's either because they haven't decided on what team they want to play for. I think it's probably
money for some of them.
Or it's the fact that there's not a lot of teams asking about them.
Absolutely. Let's talk about number 7, though, Drew. Muhammad Wilkerson, formerly of Green Bay, defensive interior guy. He could play defensive end or defensive tackle in a 34, I believe, and you could argue he can make an impact in a 43 if you played him at the 3 technique, or you play him over the nose there. If he plays 1 technique, maybe he can sit there and convert into that role in a 43. This is a guy that I think anyone that needs help on the defensive interior should be considering him, and I think the team that should consider him most is Atlanta. Obviously, Grady Jarrett's been a great player for them, but they've been lacking that next guy who's going to come in and make an impact. They drafted Deidrin Senat to do that, although it's kind of been a mixed bag with him. He's had some good plays. He hasn't really been consistent. I would also bring in Muhammad Wilkerson so you can have a rotation there in Atlanta. That way, if the injury bug does get you or something happens to Grady Jarrett, you have an experienced guy who still has upside. I believe this is one of those guys that, unlike some of the guys at the bottom end of this list, still has potential to be a very good player.
This is a guy that showed that he's a great player. You got to remember, he played for the Jets. He got a big contract, showed that he was worth all that stuff. But then, he didn't.
Exactly.
And then now it's been 2 years in a row where the last year in the Jets and then with Green Bay, that he literally kind of just didn't show that he has the will to want to play anymore. I don't get me wrong. I think he can still play. I think he can go, as Sharif said, he's reading my mind, can go anywhere. But the thing is
there have been questions about his attitude.
How? Yeah.
And if you're a championship team or you're moving in there, unless you need to get better specifically at defensive tackle, do you call this guy? I think no. Not if he's going to be a guy who's going to mess up your locker room. So, especially with the Jets, there's a lot of talk about, even before he got his big contract, before he got paid, he doesn't have the attitude we want to see out of a franchise-level player. That's why they moved on from him. Do you want to sign him if you're Kansas City and you're like, we need to win right now? Or the Patriots. You don't go after this guy because he's the guy that he's the poison pill in the locker room. You do not go and pay a guy like that. If you're Atlanta and you need to add more, it's worth the risk at that point. You can sit there and say, we will work with the attitude. We're not worried about that. We'll find a way to make it work with him, and he can make an impact on our defensive line to help out. It insulates Atlanta against injury, which has been one of their biggest concerns over the past couple of years. I think this is a good signing for Atlanta. I wouldn't say anywhere. I think a lot of these championship teams are sitting there saying, for what he brings to the table, he's not worth the attitude.
Wilkerson is he's a Swiss Army knife on the defensive line. And that's why the reason I think he can go anywhere. If you're looking for someone to play in the middle, he can do it. If you're looking to put him on the edge to get the pass rusher, he can do that as well. Sharif also said he could see him go to Seattle. That might be a great fit for him.
And,
of course, I think they're going to look more for like a speed rusher on the side, on the defensive end.
Well, let's not sell me short. They agree. They think both Brian and Sharif say Atlanta would be a good spot for him as well. But I think Seattle's another one of those teams, like I was saying, and I agree with you here, that needs to up its game just a little bit if they think they're going to win a Super Bowl. They made the playoffs last year. Obviously, things didn't go their way. But if you could add a piece or two, and I know Frank Clark is gone, but if they can add a couple more pieces, all of a sudden, at least in their minds, they're going to be thinking, we can go get to the Super Bowl. I think Wilkinson fits into a team like that much better than he fits into a team that's already ready-made to succeed.
Yeah, and at the age of 29, he's sitting there where he'll probably be a 2 to 3 year contract, really heavy on that first year, possibly lose out if he doesn't do well. This is, even though he probably deserves a 1 year improvement deal just because of his age, they're probably going to try to hold him off just in case he performs well.
Let's talk about number 6, Danny Shelton, coming out of the Patriots. I know he has not had the career living up to where he's at, but he's 26, Drew. He's a young defensive tackle that can make an impact. He was an unsung player in the Patriots front seven last year, which was not necessarily a great player, or a great unit, I should say. Outside of Trey Flowers, they kind of struggled. I think Green Bay needs to pick him up. With Muhammad Wilkerson departing, they need more help on their interior. They just paid the edge rushers. It's not going to do you any good to sign all those edge rushers if teams can run for 3 or 4 yards on first and second down and get to manageable third downs. I think Danny Shelton would be a good signing for Green Bay to kind of shore up that interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, this is one of those players that kind of shocked me a little bit that he hasn't found a way or a home yet. And when you think about it, think about all the Patriot players that leave. Everyone sees what they could be in the Patriot uniform. They think they can get that same potential or maybe just a slight bit less. I mean, Shelton wasn't a terrible player by any means. It was just one of those things the Patriots do where they're like, you're no longer
even in Cleveland.
You're no longer, well, I mean, you're right, but you're no longer a value to me in my system. I'm gonna replace you with somebody else that's cheaper and younger. So this is a guy that I'm a little bit surprised has not found a home yet. And I'm not saying he's a starter. I'm not going to sit there. He'll be the best guy on your defensive line. It's just a little bit of a shocker that he has not found a home.
Absolutely. And again, with a lot of these defensive players, we're sitting there saying any one of these teams could sit there and pick him up. Sharif is agreeing with me saying Green Bay would be a good landing spot for him. He's also saying Carolina, which I totally agree. Yeah. When you're as defensively minded as Carolina is, you can never have enough defensive linemen to step in and rotate and everything like that. I think Danny Shelton is one of those guys that with his age and with his draft pedigree when Cleveland took him in the first round, right, he could go to a lot of these places that need help on the interior and rotate. I just don't think you're signing this guy expecting him to be to resurge in his career. I don't think, especially even with the Patriots, with what we saw last year, if they couldn't make it work, you're not signing this guy and saying he's going to be our next defensive anchor on the inside of the defensive line. I think you sign him and say he's a guy that comes in and maybe he's our second, maybe he's our third, and he gives us some good snaps. He gives us 30% of the snaps, and we get some quality play out of him.
Another first-round pick that will more than likely find a home. It just depends on when.
I think a lot of these guys will find a home before the season starts, but it'll be news that's kind of under the radar. Let's talk about number 5 here, Drew. Trey Boston, formerly of Arizona. This guy, for free safeties, as far as he goes, has had a pretty good couple of years to not be signed. I think he's kind of expressed some of his frustrations with not being signed and not being paid extremely well for a free safety. This is one of those guys that, even though he's done very well, it seems like nobody wants to take a chance on a 27-year-old.
Well, until this year of, honestly, a free agency, safety's been a commodity. Safety's just one of those things where you could find a safety anywhere, kind of like a running back. This is the first year in free agency with like the Landon Collins deal that you're going, holy crap, they're spending a lot of money on these safeties and free safeties. With him, I think it's a scenario of where he played. And unfortunately for him, regardless of how well he played, he's going to be overshadowed by Patrick Peterson. He's going to be overshadowed by Arizona not doing well. So even though he is a player that can perform pretty much on any team, in my opinion, that stuff makes a difference when, when people look at him and think about, okay, is he worth $5-7 million a year?
No. And I agree with that. I think it's going to be a low-dollar deal. It's going to be a prove-it deal as well. I mean, I know he's coming off 2 prove-it, 1-year deals up to this point, but I think he's in for a third one. I don't think anyone's going to sit there and look at what he's done and commit and say, we'll give you 3 years with some guaranteed money that we just have to have you on our team. Not when there's guys like Adrian Amos and Earl Thomas and Eric Berry, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, all floating out there that you could sit there and say, I would much rather have those guys than Trey Boston on my team. The only argument against Eric Berry versus him is you can say the age and the injury.
Right.
Where Trey Boston has been healthier, he's younger as well. But when it comes to top end, you're not getting top end with Trey Boston that you're getting out of Eric Berry. you're still talking about elite players versus guys who are just good.
Before you say who you think he can go to, Sharif is already saying he would be a Redskin.
I think to play right next to their high dollar safety signing, Landon Collins, I think would be a fantastic move for them. I think them bringing in a guy like Trey Boston to play as a free safety, that would really flesh out the secondary, which if you look has been the weakness of the Redskins, at least when we're talking defensively here. Their front seven is pretty much set. It's stacked.
It is.
So if you bring Trey Boston in, I think that would be a good signing. The question is, are they going to be able to find a deal? Nobody overpays people like the Redskins, or very few teams do. So I could definitely see him signing a contract there for probably more money than other teams are willing to give him.
More than likely.
Let's move on to number 4 and talk about Jamie Collins.
Did you tell him where you thought it was?
I did not. I would like to see, actually, Trey Boston moving on to the Giants. They're going to need a replacement for Landon Collins. His defense is totally just bereft of defensive talent. They've traded away guys like Eli Apple. They've traded away Olivier Vernon. They have lost a lot of talent. And Landon Collins, let him walk to free agency. They have lost so much talent in the Giants. I think this is a move you almost have to make. And just bring in a safety. Short of them going after someone like Eric Berry instead, they need to get better at safety. I know they just signed Jabril Peppers. I would bring on a free safety to play across from Peppers and let Peppers play much more forward, play like a linebacker in the box. All of a sudden, you've got the guy that can drop over the top like Trey Boston.
And this is exactly a great place for Trey Boston to find a home at, is in a big marketing area like New York City. There is no other better one than that. Talking about a guy that has a chance, hey, put me on a one prove it deal. Let me prove I'm worth a big contract to you guys. And then maybe he can find it, because you aren't going to find that in Arizona, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Let's talk Jamie Collins at number 4 next. Coming out of Cleveland, obviously the big trade with the Patriots. They gave him the big contract, Drew, and he never really lived up to it, but he's still only 26. Are you willing to sit there and gamble on a guy like Jamie Collins, who played really well for the Patriots, and then as soon as he left and went to Cleveland, all that kind of production evaporated?
Yeah, I think this is another one of those scenarios where you're going to find a coach that says, I can get that potential back out of him. Maybe, I'm blanking out on the old Browns coach right now.
Greg Williams?
No. Well, Greg Williams was his coordinator, but
Hugh Jackson
couldn't get the best out of Jamie Collins. And maybe a coach is going to be like, I can still get that potential. And I know you picked a different team than I have. To be honest with you, I'd like to see him with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think we're a little bit weak in that linebacking group. Bringing in someone like Jamie Collins, then maybe Andy Reid. And
for a guy who's played on the edge,
who could get the best out of him.
For a guy who's played on the edge, I think it would be weird if you did shift to a pure 43. But some teams have tried to go with the undersized guy at 43 as well. I think with Frank Clark on the other side.
I'll get what you're saying, but you got to remember he played in the Patriots defense. Talk about a team that literally
Multiple
doesn't really have one spot for you to play.
But here's the thing. The Patriots maximize somebody's talent. So they played a lot of 34. They play a lot of multiple fronts.
You're going to doubt Andy Reid's coaching ability?
On defense, yeah, because Andy Reid's not a defensive coach. Yes, so for that kind of point of view, I'm going to say the Chiefs aren't maybe the best fit for a guy like Jamie Collins. I think there's some other guys on this list who might fit the Chiefs a little bit better. I'm not saying it's impossible. You could try to make him into a 43 defensive end and put him on the other side, and you have the pass rusher that you just put the biggest linebacker you can behind him and let that be your run defense on that side. But especially in a 43, you can't have those undersized guys without strong linebackers behind them, because they get blown off the ball and it's too easy to run on one side. So that's why I would be a little confused to see the Chiefs take him. But again, when you're talking about the Chiefs, they like to bring big names and they like to bring big talent to the defensive front. For that kind of standpoint, I would agree with that.
I'd sit there and put him right behind Frank Clark. You're talking about another great pass rusher, great run stopper. You throw someone like Jamie Collins right behind him. You're talking about a guy. You're talking about a side that a lot of teams won't run the ball to.
Sharif, I was with you all the way through here. He says, except for this one, you kind of lost me a little bit. He says, I can see Collins at Carolina, the Chiefs, or maybe Pittsburgh. I just don't think he has the size to play for a legitimate 43. Teams like the Carolina Panthers and the Kansas City Chiefs now wanting to play 43. I don't think he fits in those schemes very well. I think Pittsburgh would be the best fit of those three. I could see Pittsburgh signing him for sure. But I think the other two are a little bit kind of off base. I don't think he's a big enough guy to play 43. I don't think we're going to move him to the defensive end.
Just me and you.
Hey, I've been with Sharif everywhere else up to this point, but that's okay.
Just on the Jamie Collins, that's all we're saying.
Charlie also says a good coach or a great player will bring out the best in his teammates. I agree with you on that. The question is going to be, what kind of coach thinks they're going to be able to reinvigorate this career? And for me, I think I see him going to a team like Baltimore. Where else do you bring in a bunch of defensive talent and just turn these guys loose? Usually they go with no names, but I think they can absolutely rehab this career. They can bring in a guy like Jamie Collins, run more of a 34 set, let him be the edge rusher that they need with guys like Terrell Suggs and Zadarius Smith both leaving the offseason. I think this would be a great signing for them. Not to mention you're robbing a division opponent in the Cleveland Browns.
I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a great signing, too. It makes more sense because they're so depleted on defense. But let's just be honest. Teams are going to be looking for anyone to make a difference in play on defense. And when you look at a team that's struggling in a position like the Chiefs or like Carolina or even Pittsburgh for a matter, Jamie Collins is an ideal guy to come in there and replace somebody.
Sharif also asked, is 26 years of age of bad luck? And let me say this, it's only bad luck if you're not good on the football field. If you are, that's usually where you get that fresh new contract for 4 or 5 years. So it's either the best or the worst. No, there's not much in between. Let's move forward and talk about number 3, Drew. Jay Ajayi.
Let's do it.
Running back, formerly of Philadelphia, 26. This is the most intriguing guy on the list, I think. To see a guy who had all the talent, all the upside in the world coming from Miami, had to show some flash in Philadelphia as well. Then all of a sudden, it's like everything just turned against him. Now all of a sudden, he's the guy who can't get things done. He's got no talent. Everyone's kind of dogging him and everything like that. Drew, we're talking about a guy that was probably a 3rd or a 4th round pick in fantasy last year, being still a free agent right now at this point at 26 years old.
I don't think it's no one think he has talent. It's just like he's too off and on. He's like a light switch. There's big games that he just goes completely off, and there's no way of stopping him. And he looks like one of the best running backs in the league. And then he does like a 2 to 3 week stint where it's just like you're one of the worst running backs in the NFL. And I'll say this about it: running back is a commodity. There's no doubt about it. They can find talent anywhere in the draft from round 1 to round 7 that you could put someone in there, play 16 games, and get average play. So if you want to be a 26-year-old running back in the NFL, you perform over average. You perform above average all the time. And a 1 week, a 2 week, and a 3 week stint of not being above average at 26 years old at a running back, you're not going to find yourself a lot of places to call home.
To Brian's question, do you think it's the injuries? Have the injuries derailed his career at this point? I mean, I know he is a guy that kind of goes in and out of the lineup a lot. I do think, look, when I saw him in Miami, I also said he's a flash in the pan. I said he's not a guy that's as good as everyone wants to talk him up because he had a good season in Miami. Even with Adam Gase, who, let's face it, got the best out of Jay Cutler. He made Jay Cutler look like an MVP almost.
Yeah. To be honest with you, until last year, he's never had a significant injury that he's lost an ample amount of time on the field. I think that does become a little bit of a question mark, which he'll find a little bit less money in his contract. But I do think someone will pick this guy up because let's completely admit it. Besides quarterback, everyone gets hurt. Everyone misses a week or two. It's the guys that can't stay on the field when they're getting hurt for like 6, 8 weeks, 16 weeks. That's where you're going to struggle. Jay Ajayi, besides last year, has really proved he is a workhorse in the NFL. Question is, he just can't stay productive.
I think he could be a very good number 2 running back, which is why my perfect fit for him would be the LA Rams. When they signed C.J. Anderson last year, I think it was the best insurance blanket they could have bought, and I think they've kind of learned their lesson maybe going forward. That's why they drafted a running back in the 3rd round as well to try to back up a guy like Todd Gurley. They don't want to have Todd Gurley take 400 touches during the course of a season and then get to the playoffs and be totally exhausted and be totally useless. If they want to win a Super Bowl, they need to keep Todd Gurley fresh. And to do that, you need talent at that number 2 spot. I think Jay Ajayi would be the perfect fit for them. He's a guy that's competent enough to make things happen, has enough of a high ceiling that he can take over a game if you need him to. He's a guy that can do almost everything for the Rams as well. I like to see him go there. And it could be an upgrade over C.J. Anderson. We could see the Rams go even win a Super Bowl because they have the good 1-2 punch at running back.
I can see that as a good pick. Sharif saying he could be a buck or a number 2 at the Rams or Saints because he's agreeing with you. I also got another team that he might be with.
See, I told you we're on the same page, Sharif.
I have another team that we're not all thinking about. Carolina. After McCaffrey is, when he gets tired, they need someone to go in there. They need someone to be that next workhorse.
And that's what I've been saying. But I think they've kind of disproven that that's not what they want. I mean, last year they signed C.J. Anderson, and everyone's like, okay, that'll be a great 1-2 punch. And then what happened? By like week 6, they cut C.J. Anderson, and it's all Christian McCaffrey. They're just convinced we're going to wear this guy out. By the time he's 28, he's not going to be able to walk anymore. They just put everything on McCaffrey's shoulders. So I don't think Carolina is interested in signing him, but I will give you this. I think that would be a good landing spot for him. Also, Sharif said Tampa Bay. I can't sit there and say Tampa Bay is a spot because I already have them a couple times on my list, and I didn't want to say every free agent here should go to Tampa Bay to get them better.
Well, I said, but it would be a good spot. Carolina, and Sharif's thrown every free agent so far to Carolina. So
the Saints,
those are the 2 teams that are getting everybody.
Just finishing it up, as for the Saints, they did sign Latavius Murray already, and I do believe he's a little bit better than Latavius Murray is, but I'd be shocked to see the Saints sign another running back. It wouldn't be a bad fit. I just don't know if necessarily they're going to go spend the money to go bring a guy like Ajayi in when they already have what I think they consider their 1-2 punch.
And Charlie says, when the game is on the line, you need your best. And that's kind of where I'm getting at with Jay Ajayi. Even though he shows flashes in the pan where it's like, man, this guy's good, he seems to disappear when you need him.
That's why you bring him in as Robin, and you have Todd Gurley be the Batman. So I think that would be the best fit. Any team that has a running back currently right now that is looking for a backup that can run the ball with power, that can run with a little bit of speed.
Brian brought up a great team in the Packers.
I like Aaron Jones. I think Brian's a Chicago fan. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Brian, but I'm pretty sure you're a Chicago fan. I like Aaron Jones. I like what they already have going. They have Jamal Williams as well as a running back who can run with power as well. I don't know how he fits in there. I think maybe he could take it over and be better than either one of those guys. But I think with what they've got and what it would probably cost to bring Ajayi in, they're probably not entirely interested in it.
Jeremy, we're glad you could join us. It's always a party when you and that beard come in.
Absolutely, man. Good to see you. Let's move on to number 2. A guy you know intimately well, Eric Berry.
Intimately?
Intimately. He's one of your favorite players, as I'm told.
No, I kicked him out of my house since then.
Formerly of Kansas City, the 30-year-old safety who struggled mightily with injuries these past couple of years is now a free agent. Drew, he's coming off a big money deal with Kansas City. Where would you like to see a guy like Eric Berry go?
Back to the Chiefs, man. I ain't gonna lie, back to the Chiefs. The only reason he's sitting out there is because no one knows what kind of injury he actually has. This is not an injury through football moves. This is hereditary. He has his bone spurs on both of his heels that are messing with his Achilles, that are causing him to be really tight. He neglected to have surgery on his other one, but a lot of doctors are saying he needs it. We're talking about a 30-year-old safety at his prime that was literally the best safety in the league. I don't care what anyone says, even over Earl Thomas. It sucks for him, to be honest with you. But if he can get cleared, or if he can have surgery on that other heel so his Achilles can stay attached and not ripped, I mean, you're talking about a guy that can come into any system, in my opinion, and be above to average safety. Let's be completely honest. I'm not denying here that he's been away from the game for way too long. We saw him play in the Patriots, and he seemed to be a shadow of himself, but he obviously wasn't at full speed. So you're talking about a player that's going to need to get healthy completely before he can find a home. But luckily for him, he plays the position on defense that you can play into your late 30s if you know how to. So the first thing he needs to do is find a way to get healthy.
I agree with you, man. I mean, between the cancer and, like you said, all the hereditary stuff, I don't know if anyone's had worse injury luck than Eric Berry. On top of it, as for our comment section, Sharif says Berry can be a Brown or a Colt, maybe even the Patriots. He's still in my thunder because I think Indianapolis is the perfect landing spot here. They've shown a willingness to pay veterans. They've shown a willingness to take Chiefs.
With say you can match up with Justin Houston again.
Exactly. I would like to see him go to Indianapolis, put him next to Malik Hooker, play him in more of a strong safety role where you let him tackle a little bit. You move that strong safety to cover the tight end and let Malik Hooker play over the top. I think that would be a pretty good setup for them. Not to mention, Indianapolis has all this money. Even if you wanted to overpay a little bit, I think bringing a guy like Berry, if he could ever find his health, like you kind of mentioned before, if he ever finds any little bit of that elite play we got out of him, Indianapolis can totally use that on their back end of their secondary. This is the kind of move that wins you Super Bowls. If they could bring in a guy like that, I would sign him right now to be my 4th safety and sit there and say, I'm just going to gamble on maybe he gets healthy. And then all of a sudden we have one of the best safeties just coming back.
I mean, that's exactly what the Chiefs did last year.
Exactly. And you have, unlike the Chiefs, Indianapolis has all this free cap space.
Right.
They can sit there and spend whatever they want on Eric Berry. There's almost no reason, I think, for them not to do this. As for the other ones you mentioned, Brian is saying the Chiefs would be a good fit for him. I agree. Maybe they bring him back on a cheap deal. Would you like to see a reunion?
I would
too.
love it.
Sharif's also saying the Browns, I think he would fit pretty well with Jabril Peppers. You could move him into more of a free safety role there. The cool thing about Eric Berry is he has the skill sets where he can play free, he can play strong, he tackles really well, he covers really well, he plays zone coverage really well. He can do literally anything you want him to do. And I know the old saying, jack of all trades is a master of none, but this guy's like a master of all trades. So I think any one of these kind of roles you want to put him into, he could actually absolutely find a role and find a spot in any team almost.
Absolutely. Jeremy says, too much liability. He's a great player, though, but he can make an impact on any team. I think we're completely agreeing with that. We're talking about a guy that he can, even just a smidge less than what he was, is still a great player on any team in the NFL.
Absolutely. And Sharif saying the Colts have a lot of money. I totally agree. And Jeremy says he'd like to see him on the Colts. Look, I think that's the right move to make. Spend $3 million of that $100 million you've got sitting in your wallet right now and sit there and say, he's our 4th safety. If he gets healthy, if he can finally find his way onto a football field, we're that much better for having him. There's no reason to not do it, but the Colts have been a head scratcher. I mean, Ballard, for as much praise as everyone heaps on him and everything, has had $100 million in a team that was very close to making it to the Super Bowl. If they would play the Chiefs a little bit better, I think they could have beat the Patriots. I look at this, Drew. I mean, I'm like, why are you not spending all this money to try to get there?
I literally think it's a strategy to keep your draft picks. I know that the
you don't have to spend them here, though.
I know the contracts are far out, but maybe they do a deal a little bit earlier. Maybe their offensive line, again, just does one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and maybe they're like, we're going to keep this group together, and the next thing you know, that's the highest paid offensive line.
And going back to the comment section, you don't even need to make this a pay-for-play kind of scenario. You can sit there and give them guaranteed money because you have it to spend. It's wasted if you don't. So Indianapolis might as well open the wallet and try to bring more talent on while they have the chance. Let's talk about our last guy, though.
1 second, because the comment Sharif made is exactly what kind of contract you'll find with Eric Berry. It'll be a contract based on performance. There's no doubt about it. That's exactly the contract he'll
that's
have.
what I was talking about. But I don't think you need to if you're Indianapolis. Other teams, yes. If you're tight on cap space, sure. Make it performance-based for Eric Berry. But you got $100 million sitting in the wallet, Drew. Just spend it. Sit there and give him some guaranteed money for a year.
I'm not disagreeing with the Colts signing what you're saying about the Colts. What I'm saying about any contract that Eric Berry gets, it's going to be performance enhanced in contract.
I'm saying it shouldn't if you're Indianapolis.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right, and that's my point. If you're anyone else, sure, you can make it performance-based. For a guy who's missed that much time, that's important. Yeah. But for Indianapolis, who has more money than God at the moment, you just spend the money, right? You just spend it, and you don't care about it.
How much money does God have?
I don't know.
Okay.
But they have more than him.
Didn't sound like a lot.
More than $100 million?
I mean, that's
doing better than me.
Pocket change, man.
Let's talk about Ndamukong Suh being our best available free agent here, Drew. How much left does this guy have in the tank? That, to me, is the question.
This is my one player that it's not because he hasn't had teams requiring about him. This is a guy that's going, I'm going to wait until I find the right opportunity, the right team. I want to win a ring. He, at one point in time, this was the best defensive player in the NFL, or arguably one of the best defensive players in the NFL. This is a guy that can sit there and was more than likely going to be a Hall of Famer. So what's one thing that stamps you into the Hall of Fame for sure is usually a Super Bowl ring. And maybe the one team that didn't hit him up was the Patriots. Maybe he's thinking, I could go back to the Rams, but I don't know how much I believe in it. I mean, this is a guy that I don't think has any issues with teams calling him and asking what it costs to bring him in for his
exactly
for his performance. It's the fact that he's waiting to find the right spot.
And my question is, what are you going to get out of him? Obviously, we saw his talent decline a little bit with the Rams. He was not the same Ndamukong Suh that we saw even in Miami. The question is going to be how much is left of the tank, but if you're some of these teams like Denver that need to get back on track and need to be sure on the interior of your defensive line, look, they've already got the exterior fixed, right? They've got Bradley Chubb out there. They've got Von Miller on the other side of him. They have guys even like Ethan Wolf who are going to be able to support you in the middle. I would like to see Ndamukong Suh go somewhere like Denver and just be part of one of the best defensive lines in football at that point. Work on the strengths. Get better at your strengths, and all of a sudden you're going to have an identity. I think the Denver Broncos would be the best team for it. Sharif is saying the Chargers, so I don't think that's a bad spot either, especially when you're talking about him playing with guys like Bosa and Ingram on the outside. That would be, again, a great fit for him. I think any team that needs an interior lineman should absolutely be giving this guy a call, even at this time of year.
I'm going to stick with the AFC West, and I'm literally going to say the Chiefs.
And Charlie's open. No, he goes nowhere, but somebody is going to. Before you see the season start, somebody will spend a little bit of money on Ndamukong Suh. I think the biggest thing is, what's the right price for a guy that seems to starting to decline?
I'd like to see him on the Chiefs. Chris Jones is definitely their star player on that defensive line, but he's not really much of a guy that sits right in the front that takes up a lot of blocks and stops the run. He's more of a pass rushing defensive tackle. I know they took Nnamdi in around 2 or 3 in a couple years ago in the draft, but to bring in someone like Sanu that can alternate with those guys would be huge for the defensive line for the Chiefs. Talk about someone that can come in there and make a difference in the run game.
And I think they're hoping Kalen Saunders turns into that guy.
And don't get me wrong, they drafted Saunders as well, but to have 4 guys that legitimately could start at any point in time, that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely, Drew. All right, man. We've talked our football for today. Again, longer than I meant to, but we talked our football for the day. Why don't we talk about... Well, let's start with Kawhi Leonard and that crazy dagger of a shot that just absolutely ruined the 76ers.
Was it a dagger?
It was a sword. He stabbed him with that. Honestly, when I saw that, I was like, "There's no way." I was just like, "There's no way." As soon as he did the little fadeaway action, I was like, "There's no way."
The first bounce, I said, "Oh, it missed," and it did some ugly spinning, and it went straight in. I don't think a dagger is the right word.
That was a dagger through the heart of the 76ers.
Dagger is a straight
That was
into it.
Yeah, through the heart of the 76ers.
What's the thing that hooks and kills
organization.
somebody? A boomerang? I don't know. That comes back to you.
It was a crazy boomerang. It was an amazing shot, right?
It was absolutely amazing shot. This is what you literally stamps why he is considered one of the most electric free agents that could come on the market next year. I know everyone's talking about KD, but as much as KD is amazing, it's not a Kawhi fit. Kawhi's a little bit different. I think KD's kind of that guy who, he can go to any team, but I don't mean to say this like KD is one of the best players ever to play in the NBA. I want to say this absolutely right. KD is definitely one of the top 10 players ever to play the game. What he can do at 7 foot or whatever, however tall he is absolutely amazing. But what Kawhi brings defensively, passion towards the game, what he brought to the Spurs, and now a Game 7 buzzer beater for the first time ever in NBA history. You're talking about a guy that you could literally utilize and build a team around. And as much as the Raptors have been good, a lot of that has been because Kawhi has been so good.
Absolutely, man. Sharif's thinking he's already moving on to the Clippers. I think that's the favorite for landing a guy like Kawhi, but I think there's going to be, 30 NBA teams that would like to be talking to him and say, hey, why don't you come on over here? Maybe 29 if Golden State can't afford him. Going back to some of these other spots that I think he could land, man, do you see him going somewhere with a guy like Kevin Durant, and all of a sudden we've got 2 superstars, maybe going somewhere like the Knicks that are going to have a high pick as well, and all of a sudden we're going from a team that's winning 15, 20 games a year to going and being a playoff contender in the East, just overnight. Do you see that quick of a turnaround? I know we talk about benches, we talk about everything else, but in the NBA, I think it's almost proven that if you land a couple of these superstars, you almost go from nothing to competitive overnight.
I'm going to go back to one of the comments that was said earlier where it says, I think it was a good coach, a great player brings out Charlie. A good coach, a great player will bring out the best in his teammates. When you bring in someone like Kawhi to whatever it is, who's not a selfish player, who doesn't expect to take 30 shots, this is a guy that literally will be a team builder. This is a guy that you want to bring in. That's why I'm not trying to knock KD. But if I had the option of who I was going to start right now to bring a team around, as exciting as KD is, exciting as he can fill up a stadium, Kawhi builds a team around him.
We certainly carried the Raptors. No doubt about that. I mean, you look at their shooting percentages and everything else. Game 7 was pretty much Kawhi and everyone he could drag to the finish line versus the 76ers. So, Again, he's a guy that's almost got this team to the Eastern Conference Finals pretty much, I don't want to say single-handedly because he's had some support through the season. But when everything was on the line and the rest of the Raptors team kind of folded, he definitely did not. I think that's important. He's the guy who can be clutch in those big moments. I think that's great for any kind of franchise.
Yeah. Brian says Kawhi will stay in Toronto and build a team in the East.
He says he might stay in Toronto.
Might stay in Toronto. I'm sorry. I left out a word.
If they get to the finals, I think that's a big word, Drew. Might versus R. That's pretty huge.
When you put it in there, he's saying he thinks he'll stay in Toronto. That is a statement of I think he'll stay.
I think a lot of it depends on what this series looks like. I mean, if the Bucks kind of dominate them, like a lot of people are picking them to, I think maybe he moves on. I think if they can hold their own at the very least, if they can take this to 6 or 7 games and it's close and they're like, oh, we're a guy or two away from being that competitive, maybe he does stick around. But I don't think Toronto was his preferred landing spot to begin with. I think he wanted to go out west to begin with anyway. I think he's probably on the move unless the Raptors really convince him here that, hey, we can do this. We just need another year.
Yeah, and Sharif says Clippers. Number 1, they have a great front office. Number 2, they have a great coach. And number 3, Clippers have talent, and he bought a house around San Diego.
Well, when you got that kind of money, the house thing I don't think is as big of a deal. You can kind of spend your off season and all your free time wherever you want.
Wherever you want.
But I will give you that. I do think the Clippers would be a great fit for him. He's kind of expressed interest in going back out to California where he's from. I think that would be probably a good landing spot for him. Again, the Clippers were an 8 seed that kind of challenged Golden State a little bit this year. You had a Kawhi to the mix. Maybe this is a team that goes to the Western Conference Finals next year.
It's definitely a possibility. Let's go ahead and talk about the matchup that he's going to find where he's bringing his Raptors and he's going to go against Milwaukee Bucks.
I think this is going to be rough, man. I'm going to take the Bucks in 5 here, and let me tell you why.
I'm agree with you. I just want to say something. He just found a brick wall.
Absolutely. It's not even it is Milwaukee. Milwaukee is that good of a team. But even beyond that, I think it's the rest of the Raptors are not ready for this moment. Guys like Kyle Lowry, guys like Saikam, they've absolutely fallen apart here in these clutch moments. where they needed to step up. I mean, I just don't think they have the firepower to keep up with a team like Milwaukee. I think Giannis also matches up pretty well against Kawhi. If you look at the regular season set, he did a pretty good job of limiting Kawhi's numbers and everything like that. If you take Kawhi off of this Raptors team, or at least keep him in check, who's stepping up to beat him, Drew? Because it's not Kyle Lowry.
No, it's not Lowry. It's not. Everyone's kind of in agreement with you, but Shreef's got Bucks in 6, Brian's got them in 5. I'm actually going to go, they're going to go into 7, and then I'll tell you why they're going to go into 7. It's because, I don't know if you guys have watched any of these Raptor home games, but this crowd is legitimately behind this team. There's no doubt about it, and there's one thing that home field advantage or home court advantage makes a difference is a loud fan base, and these guys can get loud. They're excited that this team is doing so well. But this Bucks team is just better. And when I said they met a brick wall, they absolutely did. These games will not come easy. If it goes to Game 7 like I think it will, it'll still be the Bucks in the outcome. I mean, because they got home field advantage.
Even more than the home court advantage. I mean, the Bucks won, I think it was 56 games in the regular season by double digits. This team is much better than anyone's been talking about. They were the 1 seed in the East, and we've kind of just not paid any attention because the West has all the sexy teams like the Rockets and the Warriors that we know are going to be good. Right. This is a team that just physically dominates you. They can shoot. They've got guys like Middleton. They've got a great bench as well. It's not all about Giannis. It's not all about one guy. This is one of the more complete teams in the NBA. They're very, very good, and they're flying under the radar, so they don't have all this scrutiny and all this other kind of media attention that some of these other teams have suffered from because they're in a smaller market. They're going to win the series. They're going to win it 5. They're going to get a little bit of rest before they play Golden State in the next round.
Charlie's going all in. He says the Bucks are sweeping them, that they won't even get a win.
Okay, and Brian's saying Bucks in 5. Sharif saying Bucks in 6. Look, I think the Bucks are the heavy favorite for a reason. I think Toronto, if you look at Vegas's odds, is the team least likely to win the championship. I think there's a good reason for it because when we've seen them in the clutch, some of these young guys and some of these guys who are stepping into that stage, or guys like Kyle Lowry that have been around but have never been that elite level superstar, they just don't have what it takes to get it done. And the question is going to be, can Kawhi carry them alone? He's got him this far. I don't want to rule anything out, Drew, but I'd say probably not. All right. And Sharif says no one on Toronto can check Giannis. I totally agree. I'm going to put Kawhi on him if it's me and hope for the best. I think he'll slow him down. I think we underrate Kawhi's defense, even though he's one of the best defensive players in the game. I think he's not taking it. Either one of those guys aren't taking the other guy out of the game. I think it's going to be one of the better battles in this next upcoming series. But again, it comes down to who else is on there. Giannis has the option to pass to somebody who's going to actually have some success, where Kawhi's probably not going to have that.
He also goes off and says Bledsoe will outplay Lowry. I already think that's been said and done, in my opinion. I think Lowry's been too quiet during these playoffs. They've relied heavily on Kawhi versus the Bucks, even though Giannis has definitely done really well. It's been a team streak. I mean, it's been a team playing together that has got the Bucks where they are.
Let's move west, Drew. The Trailblazers, that should have been the Nuggets, but the Trailblazers versus the Golden State Warriors. Look, would it matter if this was the Nuggets? If this was Portland? Is either one of these teams pitched to offset Golden State and upset them, I should say?
No, but let me just talk about my Nuggets for a second, just because that's my team. What they showed is their youth. There was no doubt about there was poor fouling when they were above 17 points or 19 points, whatever it was at this point. I'm trying to forget about it. It showed their youth. It showed what it was. There was just ridiculous amount of fouling that should never have happened. It put them into that bonus category where any foul was putting them on the free throw line. Shooting percentage was absolutely terrible versus a Game 6 where we only missed like 2. They went off and missed 11 as far as Denver goes in this Game 7. And one thing that I also want to point out is I think it's a little bit of lack of coaching there. And I know everyone's saying that he might win the Coach of the Year, but when you're up by so many points, and this is Game 7, you're talking about you win or you go home scenario. You don't set your best player. Jokic is out there all the time. He's literally going to play about everything maybe minus like 3 to 4 minutes, and that's it. There's no other question about it. This guy is on the field or on the court at all times. I always say field because of football. On the court at all times, and he does not ever see it. I don't care if he's a big man. I don't care if he's played a lot of minutes. He was so hot at the beginning, you don't let them sit and get cold. And that's what happened. And McCullough went off. And there was no question to ever knowing what to do to stop that guy. And you let Jokic sit and get cold, you ruin this on your own. This totally loss agree. Was your own fault of being too it can't be too young, but being so young and knowing what to do at that time and sending your best player.
I totally agree. I would like to see him out in the court a little bit longer than he actually was. But on top of it, Drew, he's played a lot of minutes to this point. If I'm playing devil's advocate here, when you get that big lead, it's a Game 7, you're like, man, we got the Warriors next. We have to sit there and try to get as much rest as we can because we want to beat them in the first couple games, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But when you're the coach for the Nuggets, I think you got to look at it and sit there and say, we should have this in the bag, right? We're up by 17 or 19 or whatever it was.
I don't even remember now.
I think it was 17.
I think
when
it was
you're up
17
by
too.
that far, you're sitting there looking at it like, okay, I can give Jokic a couple minutes off, right? I can give him a breather where I'm not sitting there pushing him to the limit all the time.
He was just so on fire.
I know. I know it, man. But I think, again, they got a little too conservative, and that's what cost them. It's kind of like I said with the San Antonio Spurs series with the Nuggets. I thought they were too young for this moment. I think they finally caught up with them. But look, to get this far into the conference or into the NBA playoffs, I think this is a team that's going to be on the rise for the next few years.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Let's talk about the Portland and Golden State series, though. If Portland has any chance in this, Drew, just really quick, you have to capitalize early while Durant and Cousins are still out, because there's talk of both of these guys returning and playing either in this series or before the playoffs are over. If the Portland Trailblazers are going to get it done, you've got to capitalize early, man. You have to win when some of these superstars are out, because you're not going to close the series out down 2 games, getting all those guys coming back.
No, there's no doubt about it. I don't want to take anything away from the Portland Trailblazers. They played a great game. They absolutely deserved it. That win, it was all theirs. Scott, I'm glad you could join us. He said he didn't have a good defensive play on Cantor, was hurt, which is completely true. I'm not denying that, but he just wore down, and I get it, man. He did play a lot of minutes. He was always the highest played minute guy on the roster for the Nuggets, but when it's Game 7, you're talking about this is it. It's win or go home. Do you sit a guy that's wearing down? He's got a day rest. He doesn't have to play until 9 o'clock tomorrow.
I get it, but Drew, I mean, cumulative fatigue. When you're talking about it, I mean, you've got the Warriors that, again, they beat the Rockets in 6, so they've got time to rest. They've got time to get healthy from some of these injuries and everything. And then you're playing a Game 7. Your
right.
big man is playing 48 minutes like every game. I think it was just a little bit of he kind of put the horse before the carriage, where he said, I need to worry about what's coming next. I need to worry about Golden State. We need to worry about it before we worry about winning Game 7. And I'm with you. You got to win Game 7 first.
You got to win Game 7. That was all I was going to say.
But what would have happened if you would have got there and everybody's exhausted and Golden State's fresh coming out there? I mean, if you want to win the entire championship, I at least understand the thought process. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't matter. I understand the thought process. So I'm not 100% sure. Also, Charlie says he's not a Golden State fan, but they're the one to put down. Couldn't agree with you more. I think everybody knew that going into this season. This has been the team to beat for, 4 or 5 years now, Drew, and the question is going to be who's going to have the muscle to do it with who's left. My money's on the Bucks. If I had to pick a team to do it, I think it's probably Milwaukee. I still got to pick Golden State as the heavy, heavy favorite to win all this, especially if they get healthy. Even if it's just the Splash Brothers, I'm going to give them like a 55-45 chance of beating just the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah. Well,
and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Let's talk about this Trailblazers and Warriors matchup. As Charlie says, Portland will fight, but they're still yet to be crowned the champions. Got a couple other things. Sharif says that Cantor will be the X factor. Sharif and Brian both believe in the Blazers, though. They have them in 7. Guys, let's just be completely honest. What they showed in Game 6 against the Houston Rockets without KD being gone is the fact that you don't beat these guys easily. And you literally need everyone firing on cylinders. And much as Kawhi and Hood showed up in Game 6 and Game 7 with literally kind of sitting there being kind of cold. I mean, he definitely, I'm not saying he was terrible, but he wasn't what you want him to be as your star. You need him to be that 30, close to 40-point game kind of guy.
Right.
And he was struggling to be there. So do you believe in McCullough and Hood to be that, in a sense, to be Klay Thompson? To be
I'll give credit where credit is due. When Lillard was not on, when he was having an off night, they sat there and checked it away and let McCollum do all the work. I mean, they could have absolutely kept trying to put the square peg through the round hole and kept trying to force it to Lillard, who is the star of the team per se. Instead, it took a little bit of humility to sit there and say, it's not dropping for me. So I'm going to go to the guy who's hot. We're going to let McCollum walk away with the what was it, 36 points he wound up having. So I think that's some maturity. That's some team ball that I want to see out of guys. Golden State does that a lot too. When somebody's not on, like Curry in the first half of Game 6 against the Rockets, and he had 0 points, everyone's like, oh, well, I mean, Klay Thompson was the guy who kept him in there. And they kind of went more towards Klay. In the second half, when he caught fire, it went back to Curry, and I think he dropped 33 or something like that against Houston. So the best teams in the NBA are the ones that can sit there and say, even when our star's having a bad night, we can move on to other guys. Portland has done that, but the question is, like you said, is that going to be enough to be Golden State? Just one of these guys catching fire.
But with the Golden State, you're talking about going to another All-Star. When you talk about Portland, you're going to just another player in the NBA. You can't sit there and say McCullough and Hood are All-Stars. They're not. So, and I'm not saying that they're not good players.
Right.
But do they consistently put up? Does McCullough consistently be on fire like that? Does Hood put up 25 points? No, he doesn't, because that was his highest scoring ever was 25 points.
No, and they don't. And I don't think anyone out there, well, I take it back, our comment section is taking Portland over Golden State, but I can't sit there and tell you Golden State is going to actually really struggle in this series. I think this is going to be a slam dunk. I think it was going to be whether it was the Nuggets or not. I think Jokic would have been the better matchup for them because I think they struggle against some of these big guys that can absolutely just pound the rock into the net if they need to and can also shoot.
Why, spoiler, I believe that the Bucks can win it all.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that later. I'll give you another series before you have to pick. I think this is Golden State again. I think we're business as usual in the NBA. Golden State's going to win another championship. But I want to see how this plays out before I sit there and hammer it home and take it to the bank. Let's go back to the comments really quick. Scott says, without KD, McCollum could beat the Warriors a game, maybe two. I think if they can get one or two early and then maybe steal one or two at the end, when everyone comes back healthy, we can talk about Portland winning this. But if they don't start hot and they don't start on fire and just crush Golden State while they're injured and aren't really on the same page and kind of up and down a little bit, I really don't see. I think they have to get out to a 2-game advantage if they're going to have even a chance. If they get to 2-0, I'm going to talk about the series as even. Golden State has to win 4 before they can win another 2. I think at that point I'd sit there and pick this, maybe it's more of a 50-50 call. If they don't, if they lose one of the first 2, I think Portland's done.
I'm sorry, guys. As much as I'd love to see the Portland Trailblazers beat the Warriors, I don't see it happening. No. I see the Warriors beating them in 6. I'd be surprised if they took 2 games from them, more than likely in Portland. To be honest, the only way I see the Warriors losing is going to be Milwaukee if Milwaukee gets through the Raptors. All right. I mean, that's just how I feel about it.
You mean Golden State? Golden State losing if the Bucks get through. You said Portland.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The only team that can beat Portland is Milwaukee. No, I'm kidding.
No. The only team that can beat the Warriors is the Bucks in the championship if the Bucks can get through the Raptors. And I'm with Charlie. Champions know how to step it up. He said growing up in Illinois, he saw how champions operate, and there's no doubt about it. When you look at what Curry's performance was in the second half of that game, where he put up 30 points from going to 0 to 30, I mean, that's it. He's a champion. There's no doubt about it. He's a heart of a champion. He carries that team even when he's not there. KD's just the center point of the offense, but it's Curry's team. There's no doubt about it. And when he's on the court, he's the difference maker.
I agree. All right, Drew. I think we got some special thanks here.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much again for all your comments, likes, and shares. It means the world to us. We appreciate all of it. Thank you so much for all the comments. But real quick, Charlie, Sharif, Brian, Matthew, Will, and Jeremy, and Scott, you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Absolutely. We will be back on Wednesday, so we hope to see you guys there. Obviously, great show. We had a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how some of these NBA series break out. We're going to talk a little bit of hockey later in the week and see where we'll check in with them, see where their series are at. For right now, I'm Jakey Bartender. This is Drew. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I don't, man. Charlie said, well said. Well, we appreciate it, man. We appreciate all your guys' comments.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
My only final thoughts are it's too bad we don't get to watch the Nuggets get dominated by Golden State instead of Portland. I would have liked to see that better.
Why you got to bring that up?
Well, I mean, they're already out, Drew. I'm saying I would hope they would advance one more.
I don't know why you have to bring that up.
So for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jakey Bartender. This is Drew. We will see you guys next time.